We all understand that Russia was behind this. There's nobody on our committee who's been briefed that thinks the Chinese were involved or some 400-pound person. No, this was a state actor, and that state actor was Russia.
We don't know that the Russians were involved with Podesta. General Clapper said that also. They're not certain where that came from.
So let's bring in those two congressmen you just saw. They both sit on the House Select Intelligence Committee, the ranking Democratic member Adam Schiff of California, and the former chair of the committee, Republican Peter King of New York. I want to get to Congress's role in investigating and responding to the hacks in a moment. But first, Congressman King, we heard you right there questioning whether Russia was behind the hack of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta. Why don't you buy the consensus of the intelligence community on that?
Because we haven't been shown that consensus. What we've been told all along is that it was virtually definite that the Russians did hack the Democratic National Committee. I'm willing to accept that. I have no reason not to. But as far as John Podesta, it was uncertain whether or not that could be directly traced to the Russians. And I haven't seen anything since then. And that's what infuriates me about this, Martha, is that we have John Brennan, supposedly John Brennan, leaking to the Washington Post, to a biased newspaper like the New York Times, findings and conclusions that he's not telling the Intelligence Committee. I mean, Chairman Nunes called a meeting last week, invited all of the intelligence community in. They refused to come. I find it shameful. It seems like, to me, there should be an investigation of what the Russians did, but also an investigation of John Brennan and the hit job he seems to be orchestrating against the president-elect. So
you think this is all political by John Brennan?
I think that certainly when he comes out and leaks to the newspapers that the entire intelligence community has concluded that the Russians were targeting Hillary Clinton and favoring Donald Trump, when we've never been told that before. Certainly Director Comey didn't tell us that. I've not heard that from Director Clapper. So if that is such a dramatic finding, such a dramatic conclusion, then what he should have done is gone before the entire Intelligence Committee, briefed us on it. If that's the case, I'll accept it. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying we've been given no evidence on it. When you have these stories mysteriously appearing in the newspaper, when we've been told the opposite, or either the opposite or nothing at all on it, and then suddenly it appears right before the Electoral College's meeting, I find it shameful. And listen, I think Putin is evil. I think the Russians are guilty of incredibly evil hacking around the world. They constantly try to hack the United States. I'm not in any way defending Russia, but I'm saying this final conclusion about what he's saying about Trump and Clinton, if they have evidence, show it. They have not shown it yet. Okay. And Comey has told us that it's not the case in the past.
Okay, Congressman, I should say we don't know whether John Brennan is the one who leaked the information. Congressman Schiff, you have seen more intelligence. If Congressman King and others had seen all the intelligence, do you think they'd be convinced?
Look, I discussed this with Director Brennan very recently. I think he has done a remarkable job at the agency. I don't think he's trying to politicize this in any way. I do think there's a consensus among the top leadership in the intelligence community, not only of who was responsible, but why. And I think when the review is released by the administration within the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think the American people will see that. But let's look at what's undisputed.
But why not give some of this information? I totally understand you don't want to have sources and methods out there, but can't you give the public something more substantial than what we've seen?
Well, yes, and I think the administration will, and I think they should. I've certainly been urging them to do that. But the principal reason why they haven't thus far is exactly the one you mentioned, and that is we have good sources of information. We don't want to disclose those. I'm sure the Russians would love to know the source of information so they can take countermeasures to prevent us from being able to attribute other Russian malignant cyber activity in the future. And the administration shouldn't disclose that. And ultimately, this is why I think what the president-elect is doing is so damaging, because by attacking the intelligence community, basically it's going to make that much more difficult for the current president to make attribution, for the American people to understand what they really need to about Russian involvement in our elections. This was unprecedented, and for the president-elect to continue to give the Russians deniability is deeply damaging to the country.
And Congressman King, former CIA Director Michael Hayden says Trump is essentially siding with the enemy by being so publicly critical of the intelligence community. Should President-elect Trump be so openly questioning the intelligence community?
So I think 99% of the intelligence community does an outstanding job. What I'm talking about here specifically is the events of the last 10 days, which I find unprecedented. And I know Adam says he spoke to Director Brennan. I have a great regard for Adam, so please, this is nothing between me and Adam. But I spoke to Chairman Nunes yesterday. He told me he has spoken to Director Brennan, and the information he got has not changed his opinion at all. I'm just saying, come in and brief the entire committee. You don't have to tell the American public or the Russians now all the evidence we have, but the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee, they're the ones who have the legal obligation and responsibility to oversee the CIA, and the CIA has the obligation to deal with that committee. That's their legal obligation, not to be giving it to the Washington Post or the New York Times. And if it's not Director Brennan that gave it to the Washington Post, then he should be carrying out a full-scale investigation to find out who in the intelligence community is talking to the media on this issue when they're not talking to the elected representatives.
And Congressman Schiff, I want to go back to the original question that I asked Congressman King. Do you believe President-elect Trump is inflicting some sort of damage, long-term damage with the intelligence community because of the things he said? Or is that a very legitimate point? He doesn't know it all at this point.
I think he's doing enormous damage, not only to the intelligence community, but he's doing damage to himself and to his ability to lead the country when he becomes president. We are going to have a national security crisis at some point. It may be very early in the administration or it may be later, but it's going to come. And he's going to need to rely on the intelligence community, and more than that, he's going to need to become before the American people and say, I'm taking this action based on our intelligence that this is what the North Koreans are doing, or the Iranians, or the Russians, or the Chinese. And if he can't be believed because he's sending out false tweets, or he's persuaded the American people not to believe what our own intelligence agencies, or he's given the Russians such deniability that they can come back and say, are these the same intelligence agencies that the president-elect told us not to believe? He is damaging himself and our national security. I would love to see our president act now to impose sanctions, because I'm not confident the president-elect will. I'm also not confident we've established enough of a deterrent, and the Russians will be back at this. This may have benefited Donald Trump, and indeed it certainly did during the campaign. But when he becomes the target of Russian hacking and meddling, he's going to take a very different view of matters. And I think that's why what he's doing right now is so damaging, and not only to himself, but to the country.
And Congressman King, I want to let you respond to that.
Yeah. I think, first of all, Donald Trump will do the right thing. I'm confident he'll do the right thing. And as far as confidence between the CIA and the president, I don't think Director Brennan or the top leadership of the CIA is doing very much to engender confidence when they're putting out these stories and not willing to back them up with the intelligence committees that have the responsibility for it. It just seems like a hit job.
Just very quickly.
There's so much common agreement on the very basic facts of the Russian hacking and meddling in our election. That ought to be enough to bring us together, not only to enact sanctions and costs on the Russia, some disclosed, some not disclosed, but to work together on a very bipartisan basis to investigate this in a joint House-Senate intelligence investigation or an independent commission.
And you agree with that, Congressman King? A joint House-Senate?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I definitely agree there should be an investigation. I think the intelligence committees are the ones best equipped to do it in both the House and the Senate. If it's joint between the House and the Senate, that's fine. I think creating a new commission or a new committee takes so long to get the staff together, everything together. Right now, both the House and Senate committees have everything in place to carry out an investigation, and it should be done. I agree with Adam. I think if concerted action is necessary, we should take it and support the president, whether it's President Obama between now and January 20th or President Trump after January 20th.
Okay, thanks to both of you.